My name is Lily Carter, and 3 weeks before my sister's dream wedding, my mother slapped me across the face in the middle of our kitchen and told me I was no longer part of this family, that I was banned from the wedding because my existence would embarrass everyone. The sting on my cheek was nothing compared to the humiliation burning through my chest as she stood there breathing hard, her perfect manicure gleaming while she pointed toward the back door like I was some stray animal that had found its way inside. My sister Sophia watched from behind her arms, folded a satisfied smirk, tugging at her red glossed lips. She even lifted her phone recording just in case she needed proof later that I had been removed for good reason. "You are a nobody, Lily," Mom hissed inches from my face. "A nurse. A pathetic, broke nurse. People like you do not belong at events like this. Mark Harrington's family is old money. His mother is a senator's best friend. Imagine the shame if they saw you in one of your cheap dresses pretending to fit in." Dad stood in the doorway, silent as always, his approval tucked into the corner of his mouth like a secret he would never admit. Sophia stepped forward, heels clicking against the tile. She towered over me in a dress that cost more than my monthly rent. "Lily, this is my shot at a real life. Mark is everything I have worked for. Do not ruin this for me." Her voice dripped with the same poison she had been feeding me since high school. She leaned close enough that I could smell the champagne on her breath. "If you show up at that wedding, security will drag you out. I promise you that." I thought that was the worst part. I thought the physical slap and the verbal slap were the end of it. I thought I could just walk away like I always did, but then Mom delivered the final blow. "Your grandfather never should have left you anything." He was confused at the end. "We will fix that too." It took everything I had not to stagger backward. My grandfather, the only person who had ever protected me in that house, the one who held me when Dad drank too much and Mom screamed too loud and Sophia needed a punching bag for her insecurities. He had died 2 years ago, and the only thing that kept me breathing through the grief was knowing that he had believed in me, loved me, chosen me. My mother must have seen the flicker of fear in my eyes because she smiled triumphantly. "Yes, Lily. We know about the trust fund, about the shares, about the foundation. We know you have been hiding money that rightfully belongs to Sophia, and we will make sure you lose all of it." She spat the word nurse again like it was the ugliest insult in the English language. "You think caring for dying people makes you important. You think your silly scrubs and 12-hour shifts make you noble. Newsflash, they make you disposable. The world applauds people like Sophia, not you, not ever." Sophia lifted her chin. "I will not let my big day be ruined because Dad decided to toss a few dollars at your student loans or because Grandpa got sentimental in his last years. This wedding will be perfect, and you will be nowhere near it." Tears threatened, but I refused to let them fall. My cheek throbbed, my dignity felt cracked, but something inside me hardened. I looked at Sophia, then at Mom, then at Dad, who refused to meet my eyes. They thought they had already won. They thought they could erase me like a stain on their flawless reputation. They thought I was powerless. That night, when the house went silent and my cheek still burned with a handprint shaped in cruelty, I opened the locked drawer beneath my bed and pulled out the thick leather folder my grandfather had handed me days before he died. His final words echoed in my ears. "Lily, one day, they will show you exactly who they are. And when that day comes, you will show them exactly what you control." I grew up in a house that smelled like lemon oil and regret, where every compliment had a price and every silence carried an accusation. My name is Lily Carter. I am 30, and I work nights in the emergency department at Mercy General, where the fluorescent lights are honest and the patients cannot pretend. My shifts teach you humility. They teach you how to hold a human being whose life is slipping away and tell them they are not alone. That work has always felt like the true north of my life, steady and real, whereas home was an atlas with 3 corners erased. My father, George Carter, drank to silence the parts of himself that regretted choices and then practiced regret on the family. He was a small man with a big temper who learned early to use his volume instead of words, so arguments ended in slammed doors and bruise-shaped apologies. My mother, Linda, was a social architect. She arranged lives the way she arranged flowers, each placement carefully curated so she and Sophia could look good in pictures. Sophia, my older sister by 2 years, was a constant performance. a rehearsed laugh, a wardrobe of declarations. She was brilliant at networking, at smiling wide, and making others feel inferior by accident. Together, they built a narrative success looked like Sophia's, and anyone who did not sparkle enough for their cameras had to be disciplined. My grandfather Raymond was the exception, a wartime man with a battered heart who preferred the quiet of early mornings and the smells of old books. He understood me in ways the others simply could not, or would not. On Sundays, he would come to the hospital, sit by my side in the cafeteria, and tell me about the shipyard where he worked, about the dignity of steady labor, about the way a hand that builds something is honorable. Those afternoons were the only time our home felt like it could hold anything warm. When he became ill, he appointed me as his healthcare proxy, not because he could not trust our parents, but because he saw through their thirst for status. He made me promise to take care of him and to remember, as he said with a crooked smile, that dignity is not currency. He left me little in gold, but very much in instructions and a folder of papers labeled in his shaky hand. At the time, I did not fully accept the magnitude of what he had arranged. I simply did what he asked. Outside the house, my life looked different. I rented a tiny apartment with a sagging sofa and a coffee table nicked by the years of rushed breakfasts. My name badge read Lily Carter, RN, and I wore it with a quiet, stubborn pride. My friends at work were a patchwork of stories: teachers, baristas, maintenance techs, all people who kept the city functioning. We shared potluck dinners and trade shifts for weekend plans. We did not own penthouses. We did not eat caviar, but we had one another in a way my family did not. The hospital taught me truth in increments. It taught me to see people for the complexity they carried beneath polite conversation. It taught me to speak up when the abuser sat in the chair across from a frightened patient. Back home, though, the rules were different. My parents rewarded pretense and punished authenticity. When I failed to present myself like Sophia, when I refused to apologize for being a nurse when guests came, they treated me like an embarrassment. They gaslit me in small ways at first, making me question whether I had misremembered conversations, erasing my achievements from family albums, calling me forgetful until I doubted my own memory. That psychological erosion escalated into physical intimidation. On one occasion in college, Dad pushed me against a closet door so hard my shoulder ached for weeks, but I learned to hide the pain because exposing it only amplified their shame. Sophia learned early how to weaponize my restraint. She would mock my old car in front of friends, then tilt her head and ask with crocodile concern if I was okay, ensuring others sided with her. The family practiced a ritual of small cruelties because cruelty wrapped in the language of concern covers for the conscience. Over the years, I withdrew into routines, into shifts and volunteer hours, into the lives of patients who needed me. I collected gratitude letters from parents, little scribbles that I kept in a shoebox, and those notes became a ledger of self-worth when the house tried to bankrupt me of identity. The wedge between us widened when Grandpa's health declined, and I increased my visits. He trusted me with details he wouldn't repeat to his own children, and he chose to channel his legacy into a structure that would protect the people he thought mattered. He saw what my parents could not, that influence is not the same as compassion. That decision made me a target. My parents watched the way I walked into that house with the folder under my arm, and they did what predators do: they smelled advantage. They began to circle me, asking questions disguised as concern, probing for the paper trail that might lead them to a hidden bank account. Sophia started sending messages to potential in-laws about family stability, about who would be appropriate for their brand. They practiced exclusion like a script and rehearsed humiliation like an art form. I learned to expect their cruelty and like a muscle to prepare against it, which is why when the slap landed in the kitchen, I did not collapse in disbelief. I had felt it coming in every quiet way the house had taught me to listen. The night after the slap, I sat alone on my bed, holding the leather folder my grandfather Raymond had entrusted to me. The lamp cast a soft glow on the embossed initials RC stitched into the cover. My fingers trembled as I unbuckled the straps, not from fear, but from the shift happening inside me. For years, I had been the quiet one, the apologetic one, the one who swallowed pain like medicine. In that exact moment, I realized survival was no longer enough. Grandpa once told me that silence can be noble, but sometimes silence is a weapon used against you. I laid out the documents on my blanket one by one. The trust papers, property deeds, foundation bylaws, board appointment letters. Everything perfectly notarized, legally airtight. My name printed again and again as primary beneficiary and executive decision-maker for the Carter Veterans Outreach Foundation, a charity he built quietly while everyone else assumed he had nothing but pension checks. $15 million in liquid assets, 3 fully paid properties in his name, and shares in a logistics company connected to the Navy base where he once worked. All of it under the strictest conditions. All of it meant for me. And that was only the financial part. The last envelope contained a 2-page letter written in my grandfather's uneven script. Dear Lily, if you are reading this, then the wolves have shown their teeth. Do not be frightened. You hold the leash. They treated you like a pawn because they never imagined you were the queen. You will be tempted to let them take what they want to keep the peace. Do not. Cowards mistake kindness for weakness. You are not weak. When the day comes and it will reveal the truth where their lies cannot hide. Do not raise your voice. Raise your evidence. Justice does not shout, it stands. I could see him sitting across from me, those steady gray eyes always searching for the light in others. I swallowed hard. The words gave me strength, but they also reminded me how much I had lost. That grief turned into fuel. I worked the night shift that evening patching up a teenage girl whose boyfriend shoved her into a wall tending to an elderly man whose son left him in the waiting room like luggage. Every face reminded me that pain often wears the mask of normalcy. Abuse does not need a bruise to be violent. My family had taught me that lesson well. During my short break, I stepped outside into the cold air and replayed my mother's threats in my mind. We will make sure you lose all of it. They thought I was still that scared little girl in the attic bedroom, the one who apologized for taking up space. They had no idea how much I had learned. I knew the law better than they assumed. I had read every clause in the trust. I knew which actions could trigger a total forfeiture of their claims and place them completely under my legal authority. They were already halfway there with the slap and the threats. When my shift ended at dawn, I found 3 missed calls from Mom, 2 from Dad, and 5 texts from Sophia that got increasingly shameless. We didn't mean it like that. You're being dramatic. You owe me this. The last one, the truest one. If you ruin this wedding, I will make sure no one ever hires you again. There it was, the arrogance, the entitlement, the assumption that power only belonged to them. I did not reply. Instead, I forwarded their messages to James Whitman, my grandfather's lawyer, with a short note. New developments. We need to activate Clause 5A. Moments later, he responded, understood. Call me when you're ready. Ready. The word pulsed in my chest like a heartbeat. I was no longer hiding. I was preparing. My parents thought banning me from the wedding would bury me in shame. They did not realize they had just handed me the perfect stage. Their guest list included city officials, investors, and the very board members who funded the foundation I controlled. A captive audience of elitists who worshipped wealth. They wanted a perfect wedding. Instead, they were going to get a public reckoning. My mother always said weddings bring out the truth in people, and in our case, she was right, though not in the way she imagined. 1 week before the ceremony, Sophia sent out a family email beautifully designed in gold foil announcing final wedding arrangements and dress code guidelines, including a line that said, out of respect for the Harrington family and the media attention this event will receive. We are requesting that guests adhere to a high standard of sophistication, which was followed by a list of band attire that could have easily been subtitled, No Clothing Lily Can Afford. My name was not included on the guest list, but the message was still forwarded to me by mistake. Likely because Mom wanted to twist the knife a little deeper by showing me how grand everything was going to be without me there. I stared at the screen, bitter amusement curling through me because they had no idea how much that list would help me later. The Harrington estate was famous among the social elite, a marble and glass palace used for political fundraisers and magazine spreads. The ceremony itself would be held beneath chandeliers imported from Venice, and a garden filled with roses grown only for royalty. My mother had been bragging online about how the governor might attend, and Sophia would become a household name among influencers and investors. The pressure was enormous, and Sophia thrived under pressure when she was in control. When she wasn't in control, she became dangerous. She showed up at the hospital 2 days later while I was clocking out from another overnight shift. She wore sunglasses big enough to hide half her face, but I could see panic trembling around her mouth. "We need to talk," she snapped without greeting. I told her I had nothing to say. She grabbed my wrist nails, digging small crescents into my skin. "You don't get to throw everything away just because you're jealous that my life is finally coming together." I took a slow breath, forcing my training to keep me calm. "Sophia, you hit me where it hurts and now you're worried about consequences. This isn't jealous. This is justice." She laughed harsh and brittle. "Justice! You have no idea what power means, Lily. You patch up strangers and think you're some hero, but in the real world, people like me make decisions. People like you take orders." Her voice dripped superiority like venom. "Mark's family doesn't know about the foundation yet," she added, hissing the words. "They think Grandpa left you some tiny fund for school, but if they find out you control millions, they'll think you manipulated him. They'll think you're a gold digger. They'll think you're after Mark." There it was, the insecurity beneath her cruelty. She was terrified Mark might see me as more valuable than she ever was. He already asked questions she whispered suddenly softer. He asked why Grandpa would choose you over me, why you were listed on the foundation documents and not Mom or Dad. He said he wants to meet with you, in public, like you're someone to be respected. Her eyes burned with betrayal. "You ruined this. You stole what should have been mine." My patience cracked. I stepped forward, meeting her eyes directly for the first time in years. "Grandpa saw who we all are. He saw that you would weaponize wealth. He saw that Mom would use money as a leash. He saw that Dad would let her. And he saw that I would use it to protect the people no one cares about. That's why I am the heir." Sophia shoved me and I stumbled against the locker. A passing security guard stepped in, but I shook my head because I wanted to look my sister in the eyes when I said the next part. "The wedding will be unforgettable, Sophia, just maybe not in the way you expect." She backed away, suddenly unsure. "What are you planning?" I smiled a small, cold truth. "You'll see." That night, I emailed Whitman again, confirming legal preparations, and requested recording equipment for a live reveal. If my family wanted a spectacle, they would get one. They demanded I disappear, but instead, I would walk straight into the spotlight they built, and I would not walk alone. Because at that wedding, with hundreds of witnesses, every secret they used to bury me would finally rise to bury them. I spent the next 3 days preparing not like prey, but like a surgeon before a high-risk operation, precise, calm, and focused on every detail that could save a life, or in this case, save myself. I reviewed the trust conditions again, the sections my grandfather insisted I memorize, the ones that spelled out exactly how any act of coercion, physical intimidation, or exclusion based on profession or social status by my family would trigger immediate and permanent forfeiture of their rights to contest. Mom's slap, Sophia's threats, Dad's silence used as a weapon. Every text message and email was a documented confession. Whitman assured me the legal ground beneath me was concrete. Meanwhile, at home, the atmosphere curdled into something sour and frantic. Mom lurked outside my bedroom door, pretending to bring peace offerings like a tray of food or folded laundry. But I saw the real motive in her eyes. She was searching for the folder or any hint of where I kept the documents. She walked into my room without knocking while I was getting dressed and pretended she needed a sewing kit that she never once used in her life. She sniffed around the closet, checked the drawers, glanced under the bed, her desperation leaking through the thin gloss of motherly concern. Dad tried a different angle. He sat on the couch polishing his shoes as if the action made him respectful before clearing his throat and saying, "Lily, you know, this situation doesn't need to get out of hand. We can talk about distribution after the wedding." Distribution. As if my grandfather's dying wishes were leftover cake slices to be divvied up according to who whined the loudest. Sophia alternated between rage and paranoia, barking orders into her phone one moment and begging me to call Mark's mother the next because the Harringtons were asking questions. The text messages she sent grew more desperate. "You are ruining the happiest day of my life. Grandpa loved me more. I was always supposed to inherit, not some ER charity case." The gaslighting sharpened like a scalpel. Mom leaned over my shoulder in the kitchen, whispering, Do you really think Grandpa in his right mind would trust a girl who doesn't even know how to dress for a gala? Dad cornered me in the garage, promising if I just signed over control of everything they would let me attend the ceremony, as though my access to dignity was a privilege they could grant or deny. Their demands came faster than I could respond, so I stopped responding. I stopped explaining. I watched. I collected. I forwarded everything to Whitman, who answered each message with calm satisfaction. "Let them dig their own graves," he said in his crisp legal tone. "We just have to make sure it is televised." While they spiraled, I read my grandfather's letter each night, reminding myself he saw this coming long before I did. He had watched my parents transform from a hard-working couple into people obsessed with external validation and money they hadn't earned. He had watched Sophia grow into someone who believed worth was measured by applause. He built the legal fortress not out of spite, but out of protection, and he entrusted me not because I was special, but because I was safe. In those quiet hours, I also prepared emotionally. I thought of every time my mother told me I should aim lower because girls like me did not become doctors. Every time Sophia called me boring for choosing a calling instead of a career. Every time Dad refused to intervene because standing up for me made him uncomfortable. The bruises that faded. The apologies that never came. The way my family treated me like a placeholder in my own life. I taped those memories together into a shield. And when my shift ended on the eve of the wedding and I saw my reflection in the hospital window, I did not see the disposable nurse my mother described. I saw someone forged through pain and baptized by truth. I zipped up the navy dress I chose weeks ago. Simple, elegant, and far more expensive looking than it was. But the real power was not the dress, it was the documentation in my sealed briefcase. Tomorrow, my family would try one last time to shame me. Tomorrow, they would try to own the story. But tomorrow, the truth would finally speak louder than any of them ever had. The morning of the wedding arrived with a sky so blue it felt almost mocking, as if the universe wanted everything to look perfect on the surface while rot crawled underneath. I dressed slowly in the navy dress I had ironed the night before, smoothing invisible wrinkles the way I used to smooth over conflicts just to keep the peace. No more. My hair fell in soft waves over my shoulders, a deliberate choice because my mother once said, "Long hair on me looked childish, so today I wore it proudly like armor." I applied minimal makeup, the kind that said I know who I am without rearranging my face to fit your standards. Before leaving, I opened my briefcase one more time and examined the contents with surgical precision, the trust documents, Grandpa's video message, the photographic evidence of injuries from past abuse, carefully time-stamped text messages where they degraded my profession, the email disinviting me from the wedding, the recordings of their threats, every shred of proof that their cruelty was not imagination. Everything was in order. When I arrived at the Harrington estate, I could feel the pretension the moment I stepped onto the marble walkway lined with orchids and security guards in tailored suits. Guests in couture gowns sipped champagne and posed for photographers, as if reality were a backdrop for their importance. A hush spread when I approached the check-in table. My name, not on any guest list, but the wedding coordinator's eyes widened when she recognized me from the nurse badge I forgot to remove from my purse. "Wait here, please," she said, and rushed away, heels clicking a frantic rhythm. Moments later, my mother stormed toward me, fury twisting her lipstick into a snarl. "What are you doing here, Lily?" she hissed, gripping my arm hard enough to bruise. I calmly removed her hand. "I am here as requested by legal counsel." "You cannot be here," she insisted, her eyes darting to guests nearby. "People are watching." "Good. Watching is exactly what I needed." Then Sophia appeared radiant in her designer gown, diamonds glittering at her collarbones, but the panic in her eyes dulled every sparkle. "You ruined everything," she spat under her breath, pretending to smile when a photographer passed. "Mark's family has questions they keep asking why Grandpa trusted you, why you control everything." "That is not my problem," I replied, steady and low. Her breathing hitched. "You are not going in there, Lily. Security will physically remove you." She signaled to 2 guards, but before they reached me, I turned to face them, my voice clear and loud enough for the nearest group of guests to hear. Gentlemen, I am the legal executor of the Carter Veterans Outreach Foundation and a beneficiary of this estate. Any attempt to remove me without cause will be considered assault and will activate federal protections associated with charitable leadership. The guards froze, uncertainty flickering in their eyes. Cameras shifted toward us, drawn by tension like moths to fire. Mom leaned in close, her breath sour with desperation. You think you can humiliate us? We will bury you. I smiled, small and cold. You already tried. Now it is my turn. The wedding coordinator returned, followed by Mark Harrington himself, tall, polished, and clearly alarmed. Miss Carter. He addressed me directly, ignoring Sophia's attempt to take his arm. May we speak privately? My parents watched horrified as one of the city's most powerful families acknowledged me not as a maid, not as a problem, but as someone who mattered. Mark led me down a quiet hall lined with portraits of Harrington ancestors, naval officers, and senators, grim-faced legacies of influence. He shut the door behind us. Sophia told me you were mentally unstable. He began careful but curious that you fabricated documents to insert yourself into control of a foundation meant for the whole family. Is that what she said? I asked. He nodded. I opened my briefcase. I slid out Grandpa's letter, the notarized trust, the board appointment filings. Mark read silently, his jaw tightening each time he saw my name beside words like primary beneficiary and full authority. Then he reached the last line of Grandpa's handwritten letter, a line that read, Protect Lily. She is the only one who remembers why we serve, and he exhaled sharply. Everything Sophia said about you, he murmured, she projected onto herself. He looked at me not with pity, but with respect. What do you plan to do? I closed the briefcase. Tell the truth in a room full of people who worship lies. Mark straightened his tie, set his jaw, and extended his arm to me. In that case, he said we should not keep your audience waiting. Mark escorted me back toward the main hall, a chandeliered cathedral of wealth where soft classical music floated beneath a ceiling painted with angels that would weep if they knew the sins committed beneath them. Guests turned their heads one by one, confusion blooming into intrigue as they watched the groom walk beside the woman his fiancé had treated like disposable trash. My parents stood near the floral arch, their smiles stiff cracking under the pressure of a truth they could feel gathering like a storm. Sophia clutched her bouquet so tightly, petals crushed beneath her fingers. What is she doing with you? She hissed at Mark in a voice too sharp to fit her perfect bride image. He didn't even look at her. Everyone deserves answers, he replied, and that simple dismissal sent Sophia's face draining to white like sugar dissolving in water. The wedding planner tried to maintain order, raising her clipboard like a shield. Guests, please take your seats. We are moments away from the ceremony. But curiosity is stronger than etiquette. No one moved. A ripple of whispering began. Isn't that her sister, the nurse? Isn't she, the one banned from attending? Why is the groom speaking to her? I stepped forward, heels sinking slightly into the velvet aisle runner, and as I passed the first row, a woman in pearls leaned toward her husband, murmuring, Is she the reason there's a scandal? The word scandal traveled faster than the music. I reached the stage where the officiant stood frozen like a decorative statue, unsure if this intrusion was scripted or catastrophe. Mark cleared his throat, his voice calm but resonating under the vaulted ceiling. Before we proceed, there are matters that need to be addressed transparently. Sophia blinked rapidly, her mask fracturing. Mark, this is not the time. She pleaded, teeth clenched. It is exactly the time he countered. And with that, he handed me the microphone. My pulse thudded even but strong. For years, I allowed others to speak over me, not today. I scanned the sea of designer suits and glittering gowns. I saw the cameras trained on me live streaming perfection until perfection cracked. My name is Lily Carter, and I am the granddaughter of Raymond Carter, a Navy veteran who dedicated his life to serving this country and the communities forgotten by people who believe money determines value. I watched Mom flinch at the mention of Grandpa, knowing the narrative she had spun was about to unravel. I was told I was not welcome here today because being a nurse was embarrassing to this family. I let the sentence hang heavy, letting the weight of it spread through the crowd until I could see the discomfort flicker across the Harringtons' practiced smiles, because working 12-hour shifts saving lives made me unfit to stand beside the new political royalty they hoped Sophia's marriage would create. Whispers sharpened. Someone gasped audibly. I turned toward my sister. But what they didn't know was that our grandfather trusted me with everything he built. I opened my briefcase and held up the notarized trust loud enough to be picked up by every camera. I am the sole legal executor and full beneficiary of the Carter Veterans Outreach Foundation and the $15 million that fund it. My parents' expressions collapsed like buildings imploding. Sophia shook her head violently, her veil trembling. "You liar!" she screamed, voice cracking. "Tell them the truth. They disowned you because you are unstable, because you tried to ruin my relationship." I tapped the microphone. "The truth is documented." I gestured toward a large projection screen to the right of the stage where a technician Whitman sent gave me a subtle nod. "Play it." The lights dimmed, the music fell silent, and the screen lit up with a recorded image of Grandpa sitting upright in a hospital bed 6 months before he died. My mother choked on her breath. Sophia took a step back like the dead had risen just to judge her. Grandpa's voice filled the hall, calm, steady, unbreakable. "If you are watching this, then the question of my intentions has been raised by those who value appearances more than integrity." His eyes sharpened like he was staring straight into Sophia's soul. "The inheritance I leave is bound by a single rule. No one who shames or excludes a family member for their honest work may ever touch a penny of what I built." Gasps erupted, heads turned sharply toward my parents, toward Sophia. Grandpa continued unwavering, and should Linda George or Sophia attempt coercion threats or violence against Lily, they will not only lose all claims, but will be legally liable for abuse and discrimination, punishable under federal law. A stunned silence followed. Then a woman in the front row whispered loud enough for everyone to hear. "So they banned her from the wedding because she is a nurse." The shame flooded my parents' faces, ink dark and irreversible. Sophia's bouquet slipped from her hand, hitting the marble like a small explosion. Cameras zoomed in. Reporters scribbled. The reckoning had begun. The projection froze on Grandpa's face, his eyes stern with a judgment that could not be appealed. The room crackled with shocked murmurs. My mother's hands fluttered helplessly at her pearls, as if clutching them could hold her collapsing world together. My father, he just stared straight ahead, jaw clenched so tight I thought his teeth might shatter. Sophia was the first to recover, or at least pretend to. She stepped forward, grabbing the microphone with a manic brightness that didn't reach her eyes. "Everyone, please calm down. Lily has clearly fabricated this for attention. She hasn't been well for years. She needs help." "Ah, yes. The oldest trick in the abuser's playbook when truth surfaces, call the victim crazy." I didn't flinch, because I came prepared. "Let's check the records," I replied, signaling Whitman's assistant. Click. New images filled the screen, time-stamped medical documentation confirming Grandpa's mental capacity during the recording. Cognitive assessment reports with perfect scores. The signatures of 3 witnesses, Dr. Patterson Judge Reynolds and attorney James Whitman. Click. Hospital security footage me visiting Grandpa weekly, reading to him, adjusting his pillows, holding his hand. Click. Phone screenshots, Sophia's texts accusing me of ruining her life, calling me blue-collar trash. My mother's email uninviting me from the wedding because my profession would embarrass the Harringtons. My father's message, sign the papers and do not cause a scene. The audience gasped with every new revelation. Sophia shrieked, "That doesn't prove anything." She lunged toward the tech table. Before she could reach it, Whitman himself stepped forward. "Mrs. Carter, please control your daughter." Mom's voice cracked. "Stop filming, please, stop filming." Too late. Every phone in the room was recording. These elites loved scandal almost as much as they loved champagne. Mark Harrington moved to my side. His presence alone was a verdict. Sophia tried one more desperate gambit. She pointed at me, face streaked with panic. "Lily has always been jealous of me. She can't stand that someone actually loves me. I hadn't planned to reveal this next part so soon. But justice has its own timing." "Love," I repeated softly. "Is that what this is?" I nodded to the technician. Click. Audio filled the speakers, Sophia talking to Mom on the phone 2 nights earlier. I don't care about Mark. I care about the Harrington name. He's a stepping stone. I need this wedding for the brand I'm building. Absolute silence. Even the chandeliers seemed to pause. Mark's face turned to stone. He stared at Sophia like he had never seen her before. Maybe he hadn't. Perhaps none of us ever had not the true her. He took the microphone. Clearing his throat, he addressed his stunned guests. "Ladies and gentlemen, this wedding is canceled." The sound that followed was a collective intake of breath sharp enough to slice marble. Sophia staggered back, nearly tripping on her gown. "No, you can't do this to me!" Mark shook his head slowly. "You already did it to yourself." Her muffled sob echoed like a child's tantrum in a cathedral. I stepped forward and held the microphone again, my voice steady. "I didn't come here to ruin a wedding. I came here to stop a lie. For years I was told I was worthless, that I should be silent. But silence is how abuse survives." A few guests nodded solemnly. A woman dabbed tears. A man in uniform saluted Grandpa's frozen image. "My grandfather believed dignity doesn't come from status. It comes from character. And today, character has spoken." Security approached Sophia now not to protect her, but to protect others from her unraveling. Mom tried to follow her, but the coordinator blocked her path. Dad didn't move. He just watched his empire of control crumble at his polished shoes. The officiant set down his script gently. "Shall we dismiss everyone?" he whispered. Mark looked at me. "Not yet." He turned to the audience. "There is one more thing you all need to see." He gestured for the technician to play the final clip. Grandpa's voice returned somber and prophetic. "If they ever try to take what was meant to uplift others, if they ever weaponize my gifts for selfish gain, Lily has the authority to remove them completely, and she will." The lights brightened. The truth now lived in the open. And the final stage of justice was just beginning. Mark stepped aside and the microphone was mine again. My pulse did not race this time. It slowed, it steadied, because fear had finally decided it no longer belonged to me. I faced the hundreds of witnesses gathered in all their polished finery, and I spoke the truth plainly. For years, I let them define me. They told me my work lacked dignity. They told me saving lives made me less worthy of sitting at their table. Today you have seen what happens when arrogance goes unchecked, when cruelty masquerades as family duty, when love is treated like currency. I could feel every eye on me. Phones raised, cameras zoomed. But for the first time in my life, the attention did not feel like a threat. It felt like vindication. I opened the briefcase once more this time, holding up the final envelope Grandpa left me. The nuclear provision, he called it, the one Whitman advised not to use unless absolutely necessary. Unfortunately for my family, today qualified. This envelope contains evidence Grandpa gathered himself. Bank transfers, misused funds, records of Mom leveraging foundation contacts for personal gain, and audio of Dad threatening Grandpa when he refused to move money into Sophia's business. Mom clutched her chest as if her heart suddenly remembered it existed. Dad's face drained ghost white. "We were helping the family," Dad barked, voice cracking. "We sacrificed everything for Sophia." "You sacrificed your integrity," I corrected. "Grandpa knew exactly what would happen if he trusted you with power, so he trusted me instead." Sophia lunged again, mascara streaking her cheeks as she reached for the envelope. "Give it to me." I sidestepped easily. Security caught her arms, not rough but firm. Mom wailed, "Don't do this, Lily. We're family." A bitter truth rose in my throat. "You only remember we're family when you want my money." Gasps echoed like dominoes tipping across the room. Whitman stepped beside me now, his posture tall and immovable. Under the terms of the trust, he announced in his courtroom voice, effective immediately, "Lily Carter has full and exclusive control of all Carter Foundation assets and holdings. Linda George and Sophia Carter are legally removed from any beneficiary list and are further restricted from coming within 100 yards of Foundation events or property until further legal review." Mom shook her head, tears streaming. "This can't be happening. This is our legacy." "No," I answered. "You had a legacy, and you traded it for status you never earned." Dad's voice softened, pathetic in its sudden fragility. "Lily, please. We can change. We can fix this." I remembered being 7 years old, hiding inside a closet while he smashed the living room lamp because I spilled juice. I remembered him standing in the hallway while Mom told me I was nothing. I remembered him looking away when Sophia shoved me down the stairs and said it was an accident. "No," I replied quietly. "You've had decades to change." "You chose not to." Mark faced the crowd again. This event was intended to celebrate partnership and family. Instead, it revealed greed and cruelty. "There will be no wedding today." Reporters whispered into their mics, broadcasting the downfall of a picture-perfect family in real time. Sophia collapsed onto the floor, screaming incoherently for someone to save her from consequences. But there was no one left on her side. Security guided my parents and sister toward an exit as they shouted my name, but I did not look back. I wasn't abandoning them. They abandoned me long ago. Once they were gone, the room exhaled a collective breath. Some guests applauded timidly, others approached to thank me for speaking out. A woman in uniform hugged me, whispering, "Your grandfather would be proud." My throat tightened, but I held steady. The officiant asked quietly, "Should we release everyone?" "Miss Carter." I took a final look around the grand hall, all the glitter and gold, unable to mask the ugliness it had exposed. "Yes," I said, "let them go." The ceremony was over. The real justice had only just begun. The moment the ballroom emptied, silence returned like a judgment. Chandeliers still glittered, flowers still perfumed the air. Yet everything beautiful felt tainted by the ugliness that had been revealed. I remained standing beneath the arch that was supposed to crown Sophia's perfect day. The roses looked a little wilted now, almost ashamed of who they were meant to celebrate. Mark stayed beside me, his expression caught between fury and disbelief. "I should have seen it sooner," he said finally. Not apologizing, reflecting. "They're very good at hiding what matters most," I answered. "Their cruelty looks like charm until you're alone with them." He nodded, jaw tightening. "There will be fallout. The Harringtons do not tolerate deception." Part of me expected that to be a threat. Instead, Mark took my hand gently. "Let me know how I can help." I didn't need his protection, but I appreciated something far more valuable: respect. Before I could respond, Whitman approached with the precision of a man whose entire career revolved around anticipating disaster. "Miss Carter, we need to proceed with the next step. Law enforcement is waiting in the East Hall." I blinked. "Law enforcement." He gave a tight nod. "The financial investigations your grandfather initiated before his death. Today's behavior legally triggers the release of all evidence. It's no longer hypothetical wrongdoing. They demanded money you were entrusted to protect. That is extortion." My heart dropped not from doubt, but from gravity. These weren't just humiliations anymore. They were crimes. We walked to the east hallway together. There, 3 detectives in crisp suits stood with solemn purpose. They greeted me courteously, like someone who had endured enough. "Miss Carter, we are here to serve warrants for the arrest of Linda Carter and George Carter on charges of financial coercion, attempted embezzlement, and emotional abuse with evidence of physical intimidation." The lead detective paused. "We will also be bringing Sophia in later for questioning." My breath caught not in regret, but in a grief that felt like peeling off skin that had grown wrong for years. "They are still my parents," I whispered. Whitman answered softly, "And you are still their daughter. But justice does not look away just because blood is involved." I thought of Grandpa's voice echoing through that ballroom. "Cowards mistake kindness for weakness." "I want them to get help," I said, "real help, not just punishment." The detective nodded. "This process can include mandatory therapy and rehabilitation, but accountability must come first." I signed the authorization with a steady hand, each signature a quiet reclaiming of myself. When the police escort for my parents passed near the lobby, I turned away. Not because I didn't care, because I cared too much, and if I watched their faces, I might hesitate. And hesitation was the kind of silence that hurt me for 30 years. Mark placed a warm hand on my shoulder. "You did the right thing." "Justice isn't supposed to feel good," I murmured. "No," he agreed, "but it does feel necessary." Outside the estate, cameras were still flashing. Tabloids were already running headlines about the wedding from hell. I ignored them. Their noise wasn't my world anymore. Instead, I looked up at the sky. That same smug blue from the morning looked different now, like possibility instead of mockery. I realized then that this was the first event in my adulthood where I hadn't apologized for breathing. Sophia's dream wedding had become the venue where I finally woke up. As we left the property, Whitman gave me a discreet folder. Everything is in motion. I didn't feel victorious. I felt free, and freedom after a lifetime of captivity felt like the most radical justice of all. In the days after the wedding, that wasn't headlines fed on the spectacle like vultures feasting on what remained of perfection. Bride's family arrested at altar. Nurse exposes $15 inheritance scandal. Justice served with champagne. Every article used Sophia's wedding portrait, her immaculate smile now a symbol of hypocrisy, and my presence beside Mark as a metaphor for the underestimated rising quietly to the top. But while the world devoured drama, I sought healing. I returned to work at the hospital where life and death demanded perspective. My coworkers welcomed me with a surprise, a small celebration with donuts and coffee balloons that spelled brave, and a handmade card signed by every nurse on the floor. You protected yourself. You protected him. You protected countless others. I stood there blinking back tears because these were the people who truly saw me. They always had. During lunch, one of my patient's mothers hugged me tightly. "My son is alive because you were there," she whispered. "Your family's opinion doesn't matter. Look around. This is your real family." Her words settled into a soft place inside me that had once been bruised. Later that week, Whitman guided me into the first official board meeting of the Carter Veterans Outreach Foundation, my foundation now. The board members greeted me with handshakes, respectful nods, and one woman, a retired Marine, saluted me. "To the granddaughter who honors a soldier's legacy," she said. "We reviewed projects Grandpa started but never saw completed affordable housing for veterans struggling with PTSD, scholarship programs for medics transitioning into civilian life, legal advocacy for service members dealing with abuse at home. Every initiative felt like a heartbeat continuing his life. This, I told them, is what Grandpa built for. Not ballrooms, not status." And they agreed, unanimously. After the meeting, Whitman approached. "There's one more item to address." He handed me an envelope thicker and heavier than anything legal. My sister's handwriting on the front. Purple ink. The same she used back in middle school when she wrote notes apologizing after fights that she always started. I hesitated before opening it. Inside a single page. "Lily, I hate that you were stronger, but I hate myself more for only realizing now what strength looks like. I need help. I want to change. If you ever allow me back into your life, I will earn it, not demand it. Sophia." No manipulation, no excuses, no entitlement, just a quiet surrender. I folded the letter and slipped it into my purse. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, but a seed. Some seeds take a long time to grow. Meanwhile, the law moved forward. My parents' trial was underway. They were offered a deal-reduced sentencing if they agreed to mandatory therapy restitution payments to the foundation and a court order barring them from trying to control me financially or emotionally ever again. I signed the approval. It wasn't revenge, it was boundaries. A month later, while leaving the hospital, I found Mark waiting outside, leaning against his car. "You know," he said with a crooked smile, "I attended a wedding venue today. Not mine. Some other couple." And the officiant looked terrified I'd cancel theirs, too. I laughed, really laughed, for the first time in what felt like years. "I'm sorry things turned out the way they did," I said. "I'm not," he replied. "You showed me who Sophia truly was before I tied myself to a lie." We walked through this parking lot beneath the late afternoon sun, neither of us rushing the conversation. "You deserve someone who sees you," he said. "So do you." He held my gaze for a moment too long. Maybe someday we'll both find that person. Maybe someday. But for now, it was enough to walk forward with my head high, the weight of shame gone, replaced by a life I had rebuilt from the ashes. Grandpa always said dignity isn't measured in dollars. Today, dignity felt like fresh air, open sky, and a future nobody else controlled. 6 months after the day my family tried to erase me from existence, I stood in a gymnasium decorated with streamers and neon poster boards, not a ballroom dripping in crystal. The air smelled like pizza and washable markers instead of imported orchids. The guests were teachers, nurses, firefighters, veterans, grocery clerks, cafeteria workers. People who kept the world turning without ever asking applause for it. This was the first annual Carter Veterans Outreach Community Night hosted in honor of my grandfather's memory. No live orchestra, no gowns worth a mortgage, but more love and dignity than any Harrington estate could ever contain. The mic trembled a little in my hand, not from fear, but from the sheer gravity of standing in the right place with the right people for the first time in my life. Thank you for being here. I began scanning the room filled with faces that actually saw me. Most of you never met my grandfather, but if you did, he would tell you he wasn't a wealthy man. A ripple of laughter, gentle but knowing. I smiled. He would say he was rich only in the currency of loyalty, service, and love, and that's the wealth he intended to pass on. Veterans lined up at the food table, laughing with children who climbed proudly into their arms. A teacher hugged a former student now serving in the Army Reserves. A widow wiped her eyes watching volunteers assemble care packages. Quiet acts of kindness moved through the crowd like electricity, invisible but powerful. This foundation exists, I continued, because too many people in this country carry the weight of their service alone. My grandfather refused to let that happen, and it's my honor to continue that promise. Applause rose, not the performative kind, but the kind that comes from hearts remembering gratitude. After the event wound down as volunteers packed up chairs and kids ran laps around the bleachers, I stepped outside into the soft evening breeze. The sky was streaked with sherbet pink, like something a hopeful child might draw. Whitman found me there leaning against the brick wall, arms folded loosely, calmer than I had been in years. "You've created something good," he said, "something lasting." I nodded. Grandpa did the heavy lifting. I just got out of the way. He smiled at that eyes kind. "You didn't get out of the way, Lily. You stood in the way of abusive greed, of people who had forgotten what family means." I thought about Mom and Dad still in therapy, still angry, some days ashamed others. Boundaries made progress possible. But progress was slow. Healing usually is. I thought about Sophia working quietly at a nonprofit in Chicago, earning less than she spent monthly on handbags in her old life. We exchanged letters now and then. Hers were cautious, mine measured. One step at a time. Restoration, if it ever came, would be built on honesty this time. We were no longer a family held together by performance. We were a set of fragments choosing whether or not to become something new. As the last guests trickled out, I looked up at the American flag hanging by the door, faded edges but still waving proudly. Grandpa would have liked that. In the reflection of its glass case, I saw myself. Not the girl who flinched at raised voices. Not the daughter who begged to be included. I saw a woman who fought like hell to reclaim her dignity. I saw a survivor who refused to let abuse write the ending. I saw someone worthy. I walked to my car, unlocking it as my phone buzzed with messages. "Thank yous photos, one from Sophia, I'm proud of you." Maybe one day I'll say the same back. For now, I drove home with the windows down, the wind cool against my skin, my heart steady. Grandpa once told me dignity isn't given, it's lived. Tonight, I finally understood what he meant. And to anyone listening who's ever been told you're not enough, you are, exactly as you are. Stand tall, even if your voice shakes. Stand firm, even if your family doesn't. Stand free, even if you have to walk away to do it. Sometimes the best inheritance is learning you never needed their approval to be whole.